I kind of think we'll see an incident at some point that involves that, and hope, please God, it's nothing too bad. It'll be enough to wake everyone up to say we need some serious regulation around this. But I don't think we're too far off some kind of incident around AI doing something that has a significant consequence.
As AI continues to revolutionise various sectors, its impact on construction is particularly noteworthy, presenting both significant opportunities and challenges. One fundamental question that we never seem to get around to talking about is whether AI, as commonly understood, truly exists in practical applications that we utilise today. We talk a good game, but are we talking about the right game? And even when we are, we still need to consider how this game is constructed, as any successful deployment of AI is reliant on who is using it and what already exists, the data within construction and its cleanliness and reliability, and are we truly ready to learn how to apply these tools effectively? For those who feel they are primed to implement AI solutions right now, it's important we don't just go gung-ho here, and we carefully consider the practicalities, ethics, and the pitfalls of doing so. And we're doing this to solve problems rather than just doing the do. If you haven't heard of the paperclip hypothesis, you're in for a real treat. But before we get to all of that, we're in for a real treat as I introduce our guest today. James Garner is an accomplished data leader in the construction industry. And this all started with his university dissertation on data and digitalization in the construction sector, followed by being elected as a fellow of RICS for his significant writing contributions to the RICS Black Book Technical Standards back in 2012. Fast forward to 2020, James took up the challenge of becoming head of insights and analytics at Gleeds, an opportunity that allowed him to further his skill set and qualify as a data analyst in 2022, launching the company's data analytics and research capabilities. Today, James leads Gleeds' global data insights and analytics department with a focus on business intelligence, project intelligence, data literacy, and data maturity, and has been elected as chair of the Project Data Analytics Task Force, as well as being nominated as one of the top 100 people in data in 2023 by Data IQ. And if you haven't already, I want to say this now, please check out James's weekly newsletter and podcast called Project Flux. The links, as always, as you'd imagine, are in the show notes. James, welcome. And did I miss anything off that intro?
No, I think that covers everything for the moment.
For the moment, fantastic. Yeah, plenty to get into. And I want to start on a slight tangent here. I think artificial intelligence has become a buzzword across many industries, and it kind of leads to, or it can lead to confusion about what it actually is and entails, particularly when we talk about the practical or operational contexts for it. An article by Australian Data Science Education Institute. Oh, they don't make these things easy, do they? Dr. Linda McIver claimed there are many systems which claim to use AI, from the detection of certain cancers to predictive policing. All of the systems that claim to be AI are, at best, very good at doing a single specific task. Some, like predictive policing, are actually dreadfully bad at their single specific task with disastrous outcomes. So this might sound like a bizarre question to start off with, but does AI, as the majority see it and understand it, actually exist?
Well, that's quite a deep question to start with, because we're getting right to the fundamentals, aren't we? But it is a really good question, because people hear a lot about AI at the moment because we're in the middle of this hype cycle with it. And it really does depend on the definition of AI, because in reality, AI has been around, or some form of AI, by some definitions has been around for a long, long time. In fact, you could go back to Roman times and say some of the things that they invented, replicated some kind of human intelligence. And certainly, you could say that your thermostat on your boiler is a type of artificial intelligence. You set some parameters, and when those parameters are reached, it performs an action. So in that kind of context and in that kind of definition of AI, it absolutely does exist, and it's been around for a very, very long time. I think the thing that has changed, or where people get maybe a little bit confused, is where we're going. And what happened in 2022, I think it was November 2022, when OpenAI released ChatGPT. People got their first experience really of generative AI. And generative AI, I think, is the thing that conjures up images of Terminator, Skynet, the future, and machines taking over. And that's where we go into that question of, does it really exist, or is it just an algorithm? So I think on that broader definition of, does AI exist? Absolutely. If your definition of AI is AGI, which is a definition of human level intelligence, that doesn't yet exist. But I suppose the question is more, when are we going to get there rather than if? AI has been around for a long time in various contexts, but we are working towards very steadily this concept of AGI, which is surpassing human level intelligence, which is a scary thing for people, because you start thinking, wow, okay, when you get to that level of intelligence, then that exponential growth kicks in. Does it have the ability then to replicate itself and design things that even a human can't conceive of or begin to think about, which opens up all kinds of opportunities and risks? So it's a massive question, Peter, and it really depends on where you are at the moment. But in a broad sense, yes, AI exists.
For sure. In doing some research, there was loads of different angles I could have asked that question and put it in different contexts. And in doing the research, I was looking at one professor and what they were writing, and they were saying they always start one of their classes where they start to bring AI into it by asking what the class think or provide a definition of intelligence. And when you start to go down that route and that philosophical route, it becomes really difficult to quantify, because what is intelligence? How do you quantify that? And then how do you see that from a human perspective and then an artificial perspective, and what makes that thing intelligent?
It raises some deep kind of sort of ethical questions around human intelligence. Well, what's human intelligence? Are we not just the sum part of our programming and our own internal algorithms? It really does. You go down a rabbit hole, which makes it very, very difficult to come out of. You even get into things like the simulation theories around. Don't want to get too deep on podcast, because I realize some people will be listening on their morning commute. But it's, are we all living in a simulation? So it's a huge question.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. Okay, let's bring it down a little and start to focus more on the construction industry, if you don't mind. So, in the context of AI and construction, which I think people want to hear about. Data quality is a critical factor in the success of any AI-driven initiative as we see it right now. In construction, where projects are complex and data is often fragmented, the challenge of having what we class as clean and reliable data is hugely significant, and I suppose it is across the board. One study demonstrated that as the noise level in a data set increases, there's a gradual decrease in the precision and accuracy of the data, and what AI can do, resulting in a 17% drop in the quality of predictions anything can make. Gathering data isn't the issue, and it hasn't been for quite a long time, but the data itself within construction might be a problem and a bit of a blocker. What are your thoughts on this in terms of clean data in construction and how that could affect what we use AI for?
Yeah, I mean, you're right. The two are interlinked. These algorithms that we're seeing in terms of AI are all based on how good the data is. And the old adage of rubbish in, rubbish out still holds true. At least for now. I won't go down the rabbit hole of synthetic data and all that. But for now, we are reliant upon the data set that we give the machine. So there is a very real risk, especially in construction, that we are feeding the machine less than optimal data. And that is because of the inherent issues that we have in the industry. We generate a lot of data, as you say, Peter. There is an awful lot of data that comes out the back of a construction project, but it's usually really messy, and it's usually not in a process that we can rely on it. So the challenge is turning that messy data swamp into something that's at least semi-structured to the point that these machines, these AI algorithms, can read it to some extent. So and that's no easy feat. And what we have to do is, I feel, work together as an industry rather than sort of all hold on to our data as if we've got some kind of inherent value in it, because the big software companies are doing that. So if you take an architect or an engineer using something like Autodesk or Revit, anything like that, they will be feeding that machine lots of structured data that inevitably, will effectively be sold back to the industry in the form of some kind of algorithm. So I really feel, and part of my role as the chair of the Project Data Analytics Task Force is around protecting our industry and saying, look, we need to work together to get our data into a place that we're happy with, that we can then all use for the greater good, so that we're not then reliant upon the third parties. Now, I've got no problem with third parties, but we've seen what's happened in other industries where we give up control. So if you look at the entertainment industry with Netflix, or the music industry with Spotify, or the transportation industry with Uber, or any of those, you can see how quick you can go from, oh, this is a convenient tool that I can use. That's cool. I'm going to do that, to, oh, okay, it's just decimated an industry. So I don't want to sound too alarmist, but when you see it happen in other industries, you can see a pattern emerge. Now, it's not going to be exactly the same in the construction industry because we're quite complex, but that warning sign should be a warning to us all that we've got to take care of our own data. And what I'm saying, part of my mission with the task force, it's all around awareness, and we're raising a lot of awareness. And being in the task force led to the recent IPA paper that was released about using AI and data in government projects, around the sharing of data, around the creation of the open source solutions, so that we can all share, whether you're an SME, whether you're a one-man band, or whether you're a big company like Leeds, we can all share in the collective good of the algorithm that comes out of the data. Not necessarily the data. It's not about sharing data, but it's about sharing the insights that we can get from the data. Because if we don't do it, Microsoft will do it, Google will do it, Autodesk will do it. So there's a responsibility on ourselves to do it, to get control of our data. So it's not being alarmist, but also I'm very aware that sometimes our industry can be a little bit behind the times, and you can go down this rabbit hole's the wrong word, but you can kind of you get stuck in the mud a little bit and say, okay, it's just too hard. This is too hard a problem. Oh, great, a third party solved it for us. So yeah. That's where I think we've got to probably get a bit better, and that's why I think that the task force is so important.
Two things spring to mind there. Number one, the one thing that always comes up in these conversations around tech is the human part of it, and that's the bit that we don't generally focus on because we're so focused on the tech, and we forget that humans got a huge part to play in this. They are the fundamental part in it. Regardless of what we were saying earlier, and how AI is going to develop, we are, and for a long, long time, we probably will be. And the second part of that always goes around in my head is, and there's probably, or maybe not, a simple answer to this, but it's almost like you take AI to look at data, look at information, and make problem solving that makes efficiencies, that makes companies more profitable. Couldn't we just use AI to cleanse that data? But if the data's not clean already, how does it know what clean data looks like? And then you're in this cycle of clean data or not clean data. Can we use it to do this? Can we do that? That kind of hurts my head a little bit. Can you help me unravel that?
Well, I mean, this goes to that point that I was talking about before about synthetic data and allowing the machines to create their data set. But then you're just bringing in biases. That's the problem with that. It will take the path of least resistance, and any inherent biases that it already has will be brought into that. And we know in construction, for instance, how quickly things change. So let's take cost as an example. You could take a bunch of cost data for things that happened 3 or 4 years ago, and use that as the data set, and then the AI could create a synthetic data set based on that. But we know things have changed massively since then. We've had COVID, we've had economic issues that have led to huge inflation. So you end up putting the wrong biases in. But I having said that, I do think there's a place for synthetic data. So synthetic data can help you train the algorithms to the point that it's working properly, and then you introduce the real data. So there is a place for it, and I think that it's going to get better and better as time goes on. And you can see what's happening with these large language models, that they're able to create quite compelling data sets themselves now, and even at this early stage. So I don't think we're going to be able to sort of stop using that. It's going to become a part of the solution. But I think we go down a very dangerous hole if we only rely on synthetic data. We have to introduce real data, because human data is unpredictable. And you talked about noise, right? So there's different types of noise. So it's not as simple as saying that's noisy data. Or what kind of noise is that? Is that through bias? Is that because someone was feeling a certain way a certain day? It is, like you said, it does make your head hurt. And there's some very, very intelligent people, much more intelligent than me, trying to unravel these things. But I think with most things, Peter, it's always a combination, right? It's not neither one thing or the other. There's a place for synthetic data and artificially generated data sets alongside human data.
Yeah, I wrote a white paper about a year ago now, I think, or 18 months ago, and it was looking at strategic decision making with data within construction, and if we've got the right data, the right amount of data, the information that holds, and where we gather it. And one of the things that came out of it was humans are important, like we've said, but the fact that how can we what data can we actually trust? So by that, what I mean is, unless it's fundamentally raw, crude data, as soon as somebody looks at that, changes it, manipulates it, does anything to it, comments on it, it changes everything to do with that, which is a bit of a worry in itself. And again, don't want to get too philosophical or go down that comprehensive and detailed route, but because we need something to make decisions off. But it is a head scratcher when it's I actually scratched my head then bizarrely. I know, yeah, it is a head scratcher when you think about, so I can't really rely on any data I'm getting other than the actual crude raw data, but I don't even know how to analyze any of that data. So what the hell can I believe at all?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and that goes for any industry, I suppose. And we've all heard the phrase lies, damn lies, and statistics. You can cut data up any way you want, but it's doing it for the right reasons. There's lots of studies on this, and there's a fantastic book actually called Noise, which talks about this. That even the most basic algorithm based on data is better than human gut feel judgment. We sometimes feel that, I've got loads of experience, I've been doing this for 30 years, therefore my gut feel is brilliant. But that is such a flawed way of looking at it. And whilst you're right, you can't necessarily 100% trust anything. If you can get to a level of like 95% trust in it, but you still keep human in the loop, because you can look at it and say, that doesn't feel right. I need to get my human intuition there. Then I think that's the best combination. I think we're entering dangerous territory the day that we pass off decisions to AI based on data sets without human in the loop. That feels to me like a line that we mustn't cross. And like you take it back to the construction, that's exactly the same thing. We should be using the data to help make data-driven decisions on projects, but not necessarily handing that off to some kind of fully automated agent. Now, inevitably, we are going to get to the point where that's going to happen. And I think that's the point we've got to ask ourselves some very deep questions, because of exactly what you said. Well, that decision's only as good as the data that it's been trained on. So we can have some nuance to this. It's not an either or. We can have a balance. We can say AI plus human. That's the best combination.
Yeah, I completely, totally agree. I just want you to clear something up, because I think we hear it a lot, but a lot of people listening might not understand what it means. But when you say train something, what do you actually mean by that?
Okay, well, the way these algorithms work, and I'm not a data scientist myself, but
Sure.
the way that they work is literally by training it. So you train it on a set of data, and then you give it some examples for it to give you an answer on, and then you tell it whether it's right or wrong. So it gets rewarded. It's a reward system. So you tell it that, oh, that was right, or that one was wrong, and then the next time it then remembers. So the more data you give it, the better and better it gets. So it's a feedback mechanism. And that's how it works. And that's how like these large language models work to some degree, in that it's been trained to say, yeah, that's a good answer or that's a bad answer. And I think you even see on ChatGPT, it tells you to, to say whether is that good or bad, a thumbs up or thumbs up. That all is part of the reinforcement learning. So in some respects, it's exactly the same as we train a human being. When a toddler's born, you tell it, that's bad, and then you learn. So it's no different from that in a lot of respects.
Well, I think we're in a bit of trouble if it's the toddlers in my house and trying to train.
Absolutely, so I had the same experience. Need a better algorithm.
Maybe if we tell it the opposite, then it'll actually do.
Oh, now we go down some ethical rabbit holes.
Yeah, absolutely right. Okay,
to get the right answer.
For sure. Right. Okay. Let's move on then. Let's move on quickly, and to the more practicalities of utilizing AI. So. There's a growing need for, I feel, a lot more professionals to understand not only AI theoretically, but to apply it practically as well. And this requires a blend of technical skills, knowledge, strategic insight, and things we were talking about just previously about understanding and that human intelligence. And I think within construction, we're lacking that pretty much across the board, to be honest. So if we're going to use AI in the future, and I suppose the not so distant future, and also 5-10 years into the future, we're going to need to go on a steep learning curve, the whole industry, I feel. So how are we best to approach this so we have more people that can practically apply AI?
Yeah, it's a challenge. And I don't think it's the only industry. I mean, I talk to people in other industries who are facing the same thing. Mm-hmm. I think the reason it's a challenge, Peter, is because like change is inevitable, and it's been happening for millennia in some ways. You think about the combine harvester, that changed the way that we did agriculture. Think about the steam engine. Think about, even going back to the wheel or, the internet. These things changed, but they had a bedding in period. It took to reach some kind of mass adoption, quite a period of time, probably decades, to get to some kind of mass adoption. So you had time. There was time for people to get used to the idea. Usually a generation died out and a new generation came in at that time. Just take my own experience as, a child of the internet era. There was a good 10 years between the internet being launched and it becoming really mainstream that you're able to get your head around it. The difference with AI, I think, is the exponential, the fact that we reached 100 million users of ChatGPT in a matter of months means that you don't have that comfort anymore, that period to see how things go, be a little bit patient with it and let it bed in, because it's happening whether we like it or not. And whether we like it or not, there's an AI arms race going on between the big tech firms at the moment, and they're, in a lot of ways, sending caution to the wind and just delivering things. So we can't do anything about that. We can't do anything about what the tech firms are doing. But what we can do things about is our industry. It's like within our circle of influence. So I think there's a push and a pull strategy. We've got to work with the young people entering the industry because they come in data literate and they understand around AI. We also have to work at the top of organizations and at institution levels. So that's why I'm working very hard with the RICS, the AP, with the APM, helping Major Project Association, all institutions like that, to help guide respective professions. And ultimately at the top level, there's the government as well. And luckily within the UK, we are much better than other countries. I think behind the US and China, we are investing third amount in the world in terms of AI. We are going to be an AI powerhouse. And there's something out there called, and I'll give you the link to it so the listeners can read it. There's the National AI Strategy. So there is a national we're all behind this, turning the UK into a centre of excellence for AI. But then we've got to work with the institutions so that everyone understands that to be a chartered professional, this is something you've got to do. And some are doing it better than others. And then the big companies need to make sure they're see what PwC did. They've integrated ChatGPT Enterprise into their organization. That's a really good sort of first step. And then there's the training element. So what I'm doing within Gleeds is we've implemented something called Upskill, which is a data literacy course. And it just enables people to dip their toe in the water so that they understand this is nothing to be scared of. And we're not asking people to become master programmers or anything like that. It's just about having some awareness of what's going on there and about some awareness of why this is an important skill to have. And it's not an option, like the same way in the 80s when project managers and surveyors had to learn how to use Excel and Word. It's just the same now, having to learn these new tools, if you call them tools or agents, whatever they're going to be. The only difference is there's going to be a lot shorter time scale to get a favour. And that's kind of why I started the newsletter and my own podcast, because I did that for myself, really, because there was so much news happening. It was moving at such a pace. I was struggling to keep up. So it was just like, well, I need a digest for myself, fighting what's going on. And now I release that to everyone just so that people can read it. So, if you are feeling overwhelmed, you can subscribe to that 5 minutes. You just get everything that's gone on and then you don't feel overwhelmed. And when you hear a conversation in a team meeting, someone mentions it, you're like, okay, I know what's happened there, because it is moving so fast. So I think it's, again, with most of these things, there's not one answer. It's everything. But if you're in the UK, I think we're in a really good position. I think, I don't often praise the government, but we do actually have a situation where the government is really backing this.
That's cool. I remember about 5-6 years ago. So I'm a tutor in marketing and I teach professional qualifications and mentoring through apprenticeships. And one thing that I start with as an intro to digital, the digital side of marketing or digital as a comms, is Kurzweil's law and the hype cycle. And I always say that, and this was like 5 or 6 years ago, like, and you're saying AI has been around for many, many years, but at this point within a marketing context, AI didn't exist. And we're talking about things like Instagram and socials and things like that, and saying that was 20 years ago, that didn't exist. And now it's at the forefront and it's pretty much where every marketer starts. And don't get me on that, because that's just a load of rubbish. So let's not go down that rabbit hole either. So imagine in 5, 10, 20 years, what we'll be utilizing that we don't even know exists yet. And it's the stuff we're talking about now that I was talking about back then, but not knowing that it would exist, which is crazy.
Yeah, it's the pace of change. It's just going to speed up. And then we will reach that point at some point where we reach AGI. And then I kind of start making predictions at that point, Peter, because I think all bets are off. I mean, it's very difficult. I think we're going to reach that kind of level of AGI in the next decade. A lot of people think in the next 2 or 3 years. That the head on NVIDIA thinks it's around the corner. But, whether it's 2 or 3 years or whether it's 15 years doesn't really matter in some respects. We are on that path to AGI. Yeah. So we've got that window where AI is going to be our assistant and our augmentation. And then after that, who knows? I stopped making predictions.
The newsletter stops.
I'll let that do the newsletter. Or the newsletter maybe becomes a person. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, again, rabbit holes. Okay, so before we start talking about paperclips, if I was in a construction organization, and I know this is quite really broad, and I know I need to start deploying AI across the business. Now, first and foremost, I just want to caveat this with, I've got an objective. I know why I want to deploy AI, but I don't know how to do it. What advice would you be giving organizations and professionals?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is to clarify what AI is, because you can't, and there were some organizations that tried to ban AI, right? And you can't. So the first thing is to realize that AI is just going to be baked into everything we use. It's going to be in Google. It's going to be in your search engines. It's going to be in your Google Maps. It's in your iPhone. So the next version of the iPhone that comes out is going to have something called Apple Intelligence integrated into it, which will have AI. So It's just going to happen. In some respects, it's going to happen naturally. So what you've got to ask yourself is, do you want this to happen to you, or do you want to have some control over how you implement it and get the most out of it? So with that in mind, that, AI is here to stay, it's coming, and it's going to be integrated into your products. First thing you've got to probably do is implement some kind of AI policy. So rather than try and ban it, what's the sensible use of it? Because that will set the boundaries around to your organization around, okay, we're not running away from this. We're aware of it. This is how we want them to use it, but these are the barriers, and this is what it means for you. And you know what? Normally just common sense, we know these tools can hallucinate and make things up, so don't rely on anything. This doesn't take precedence over your professional judgment. The second thing is, I'd start looking at your data strategy. So if you haven't looked at your data strategy yet, it's not too late. Everyone has to start somewhere. So you've got to look at, because if you are then going to go into fine tuning some of these models and creating your own AI models, it's very easy to do that now, right? You can do it within ChatGPT, but like we talked about before, it's reliant on the data. So I would start looking at your data strategy and working out what's your as-is situation and where do you want to get to in terms of your data maturity. And then I think it's around training and getting champions around your business to, like we talked about, to make the awareness of it and to start making people less resistant to change. And you could do that top down and bottom up. So you find, some senior people within the business to say that this is something good. This is something that notwithstanding the risks, which we should be aware of, this is something that we endorse to some degree. And then you should get the champions. They don't necessarily have to be young people, but they obviously tend to be young people who do it from the bottom up. And then, you bring that into a kind of cohesive AI strategy. But it'll be different for every business, right? A one-man band or SME will have a different way of doing it. It'll be much more difficult from an organizational point of view. Like we talked about the PwC example, where they've just done a deal with OpenAI and they've implemented it through a ChatGPT enterprise. Now, that might not be affordable for a lot of companies. So there's different ways to do it, but I don't think you'll go too far wrong with that initial piece, just getting comfortable with what's going to happen anyway, whether you do nothing or not, and also getting some kind of guidance so that people understand that you're aware of it and you're doing something about it.
Yeah, and it's either having or talking to the people that understand these things better than you do. And again, it goes back to humans, doesn't it?
Of course it does. Yeah, it's all around that change management in a lot of ways. It's a cool tool, and yes, it's more advanced than anything we've seen before, but it's still going to rely on similar kind of change processes that we've had to have in the past.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so I want to finish on a hypothesis, if you don't mind, and it's called the paperclip maximizer. It was actually a thought experiment proposed by Swedish philosopher Nick Bostrom, and it highlighted the potential risks of AI if its goals are not aligned with human values. What it suggested was that an AI designed to maximize paperclip production could theoretically consume all resources to achieve its goal, disregarding human welfare. I.e., if you asked it to produce as many paperclips as it possibly could in the quickest time it possibly could, it would, in our brains, we'd go, right, we need machines, we need tools, we need this metal, etc., etc. AI in this hypothesis would just be like, well, I don't really care what it is. I'm just going to make a paperclip shape out of it, including humans, including trees, bricks, lights, anything. So this raises broader ethical and practical concerns about AI deployment. How relevant is this paperclip hypothesis right now? And more importantly, I suppose, what safeguards should we be considering to ensure AI developments in the future are aligned with construction industry values and priorities and don't lead to unintended negative consequences? Mouthful, I know, but let's give it a go.
Yeah. And the funny thing is, it sounds in some ways ridiculous, but it is actually this is true. So for instance, there was a prototype of something called Agent GPT released. And Agent GPT was like ChatGPT, but it spawned out separate little agents to carry out all the little tasks it said. So let's say this example, create paper clips. And there was a button on it. And this is kind of a prototype, so it's not real, but this is where it's going. And the button had a skull and crossbones on it because it basically says, continue going until you achieve your goal. Right? So that, like you say, let's say in the we could put it to construction industry. We'll finish this building by this date, whatever happens, right? So what happens to people's welfare? Do the machines take over and enslave the site workers? And there are hypotheses. That's not the only one. Hypothesis saying that this is where AI could go when it gets to that AGI level. So we very clearly need to think about it now. And the obvious thing to do is you put the necessary barriers in place into its programming to say that it's always overriding thing that it always puts humanity beyond anything else. But we don't know. The reality is we don't know because we've never been here before. It's not like where you can make mistakes and you can repeat it. If we get this wrong, we've only got one shot at it. If we get it wrong and the machines take over, there's no going back. So it's an extremely important conversation to have. And what concerns me, I think, and this is much bigger than construction, by the way, what concerns me more than anything is that we've got this AI arms race going on between the OpenAI, which is funded by Microsoft, you've got your Google, you've got your Amazon, who are funding Anthropic, and then you've got Meta and Facebook. And they appear to be, from what I can see, throwing caution to the wind at the moment and just trying to develop something as fast as possible to outdo their competitors. My worry is that could lead to a neglect of some of these principles that we're talking about, which is why if anyone who's followed the news, there was a lot of turmoil in the OpenAI boardroom with Sam Altman being fired, brought back in. Now the head of security has left and set up his own company called Super Safe Intelligence, because there's dichotomies within these companies where some people say we need to go faster. We need to go faster to keep our market share, and others saying, whoa, hang on. We don't know where we're going. We've never been here before as a race, and we're doing things we're not sure about. So I'd be lying if I say I'm not concerned. I think we should all be very concerned, and I think that hypothesis, as ridiculous as it sounds, is actually a very sound hypothesis. And and even if it was a 10% chance, or a 5% chance, or a 1% chance of that happening, surely that's too much, because like I said before, there's no going back. You can't say, let's try again.
The first time I heard that, it was on a different podcast, and they started by explaining, and they were talking about paper clips, and then I was like, where's this going? And I went through probably the same thing everybody else did, as I was explaining, in that, well, if you asked a human to make as many paper clips as efficiently as possible, you'd go through the practicalities of it and what materials you'd need and everything. And it didn't even cross my mind that wouldn't be a thing that AI wouldn't copy. But then I suppose that's when your human intelligence overrides anything that is artificial.
Yeah, it's that emotional. And how do we replicate that? How do we replicate that kind of very hard to program? That's what makes us unique, right? At least for the moment, that we can have those gut. I suppose it's that intuition and gut feelings that this is the right thing to do. Because if you get the coding wrong, and I guess what finds me is how many bugs do we find in is now, right? Where we change it. So we know that coding is often got issues in it. So if we're not defining things enough, you could see a situation where something goes off and does literally what you've told it to do, but you haven't told it, don't do that in the process of getting to that. So, wow, it's a big call. And unfortunately, I think this is going to become a hot topic. And, we may see an incident. I kind of think we'll see an incident at some point that involves that. And hope, please God, it's nothing too bad. It'll be enough to wake everyone up to say we need some serious regulation around this. But I don't think we're too far off some kind of incident around AI when it gets to that human level intelligence doing something that has a significant negative consequence, whether that's shutting down the electricity or, creating some kind of disaster. I think that's a real possibility, unfortunately.
I was just going to say, and I wanted to end on this, and it's a hugely, hugely flippant comment. Okay, so just bear that in mind. It's a little bit tongue in cheek, but if that's the way it was going, and we could see that happening, couldn't we just switch it off? Couldn't we just unplug it?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's too much money involved now. And you know, not so, but when you get companies that are bigger than nations on the stock exchange in control of this stuff, I think we're too far down that path. In theory, I suppose we could, but can you imagine getting Google, Microsoft, and Meta into a room and say, right, we're gonna stop this?
Yeah. Just
unless there is, but unless there is something like that happens when there is an incident that does mean that we have to have some serious things that think about where this goes. But look, hopefully, you know, we're just thinking worst case scenario, and we just keep using AI responsibly, and from our perspective, to better project outcomes and make because we have a real problem in our industry, and that's why I focus on AI. Is like it's going to, at least for the medium term, it's going to help us deliver projects better. Yeah. So I kind of stick to what I can influence.
Absolutely, and I've said this on a previous episode. It's the way AI is really going to be impactful in our industry is doing the boring stuff and the stuff that, like you just said, that it's going to be embedded in it anyway. It's going to be integrated in it anyway, and we won't even notice it. But it's going to be the boring stuff that. You know, and if you take, I'm trying to think of a really good example, but mine goes blank. But if you take things that we were doing 10 years ago that are just automated right now, then it's going to be a similar thing to that. The things in 10 years ago that we're doing that we won't need to do anymore because it'll just be done automatically.
Well, I hope so. I did see a meme the other day from someone saying, I thought AI was going to use all the boring tasks so I could do my creativity. But actually, you've got all these tools now, like UDO that creates music, Sonar that creates video. And someone says, now I've got AI doing all the creative stuff so I can do the dishes.
Yeah.
We'll see.
That's a good point. Work the opposite way. We'll just do all the boring stuff, and the artificial intelligence can have all the fun.
We'll become
Yeah, absolutely. James, I could go on. I could ask you a bucket load of other questions, but I think I'll leave that for a time where I can invite you back on, and we're going to look for that off switch that we need to find somewhere. Thank you so much. It's been absolutely fantastic. Fascinating talking to you. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and hopefully I can return the favour and you can come on to the Project Flux podcast at some point too.
Yes, let's do it. Cheers, James.
Thank you, Peter. Bye-bye.